Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Joining me now on the phone is Neil Katyal, constitutional lawyer and former acting Solicitor General under President Obama. Neil, I want to get to you straight away on this. What do you make of this fight between the President of the United States and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court?
Well, it's really quite extraordinary. I'm not aware of anything really like it in our lifetime. The Chief Justice, I've appeared before him 37 times and to argue cases. And I think it's fair to say, the adjectives you think about when you think about the Chief Justice are restrained, brilliant, dignified. That's everything that Donald Trump isn't. And I think this whole episode demonstrates that. Trump is saying some pretty extraordinary things about the courts, things that he's actually just statistically wrong on, like that it's the most overturned court in the last 5 years. It's not even close to the most overturned court. But it's more than that. It's a corrosive attitude about courts and the rule of law.
This attitude about courts and the rule of law, what's the consequence?
I mean, it's huge. I don't think that Trump he cares much about the Ninth Circuit per se. I think there's a bigger programmatic agenda of which this is part, which is to delegitimize the court system, to attack the courts, and to attack the Chief Justice. And I think it's very similar to how he treats any other check and balance, any other institution against him, whether it's the media, which you obviously, Katie, know well, and all the stuff about CNN and Acosta, or the Justice Department and FBI, from firing his attorney general, firing Comey, the FBI director. Basically his MO is to attack any institution, any check and balance that stands in his way. And that's why I think, the words you said at the outset of the program are right. I mean, these are the actions of authoritarian governments. They're certainly not the actions of any president of the United States in our lifetime.
Would this mean anything for a fight, potentially, an actual fight in the Supreme Court between Donald Trump and Robert Mueller's team for subpoena power for the president, and that goes to the Supreme Court? Would this affect a ruling?
Well, I think that 9 justices are, wise enough to do the thing that they're going to do and make the decisions they're going to make. So I don't think, this episode, you can say, it's going to mean Mueller will win or Trump will lose or anything like that. But I think it does demonstrate, the president's insouciance to the rule of law. It may not affect the cases that go to the Supreme Court, but remember the Chief Justice has one other really important role in our Constitution, which is to preside over the impeachment proceedings of a president. And, the way things are looking, that very well may happen. And the Chief Justice may be, in presiding over this man that he's now in this Twitter fight with.
Let me ask you this. If he loses a subpoena battle at the Supreme Court, and that's obviously an if because there's not even a subpoena battle at the Supreme Court yet, but if he does lose one, will he now try to say that Justice Roberts was not a fan of Donald Trump's? And will he use this political attack that he's launching on the judiciary as a way to inoculate himself in the future by saying, well, I attacked them, so they must hate me, which means that that's why they ruled against me?
Exactly, 100%. That is President Trump's goal here, which is to delegitimize the institution of the court. So any ruling that's against him, he can just chalk up to, oh, they were biased against me. And, that's what the Chief Justice today was so rebelling against, this idea that there's a Trump judge or an Obama judge or anything like that. No, there are just judges in this country. And, to me, when I think of the judiciary, I think of people like Justice Kagan, who were put on the court, and within the first year, she was put on by President Obama, but she voted against President Obama's health care plan in a good part and voted to strike some of it down. That's the kind of independence that our founders envisioned when it comes to the Supreme Court, not this kind of, president's lackey thing, which the president has tried to do now with the Attorney General, and I'm sure he's going to try to do it with the courts, too.
And our good friend Chuck Rosenberg was here a moment ago pointing out that with Nixon and with Clinton, judges that were appointed by both men ruled against them in subpoena fights when there were investigations into those two presidents. So in that way, those judges were not protectors of the President of the United States. My other question is slightly different. Are we as a society more to blame for this than we're willing to let on, given the way that we talk about judges, given the way that we talk about Supreme Court nominees and then justices? This is an Obama justice. This is a Trump justice. We talk a lot about it with Kavanaugh. We've talked about it with Gorsuch. We've assumed that they would rule a certain way because of being appointed or nominated by Donald Trump. Does some of the blame here for this being such a fertile ground for Donald Trump lie with us?
Well, I think that's a wise point you're making, Katie, and we all share something about that. I agree with that. But at the same time, it's the president's job to rise above that and to call for our better angels and to talk about really what the courts have always been about, both from our founding design on, and not to give in to those impulses. And that's why you haven't had anything like the remarks you've had by this president. Every time he loses a case, it's, oh, that's a so-called judge, or that judge is biased because they're Hispanic, or things like that. This is deeply, deeply corrosive, and it takes a lot, I'm sure, to get the Chief Justice upset and to have him make any sort of remarks. But, Donald Trump managed to do that, and that, to me, is an incredibly telling thing.
A president should be better than us all. Neil Katyal. Neil, I know you're on a plane right now going home for Thanksgiving, so thank you so much for calling in. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Katie. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
It is Thursday, the 22nd of November of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life on Thanksgiving Day. Hey, we do the seafood on Thanksgiving because I'm not only a coastal elite, I'm a West Coastal elite, the worst kind. Hey, speaking of coastal elites, Trump sure hates the Ninth Circuit, doesn't he? In fact, he's going to go to war with Roberts over it. Yeah, John Roberts, the guy who calls balls and strikes. I'm pretty sure the way it's set up, the umpire can kick the player out. The coach, too. The manager, anybody, he can kick a fan out. And in the construct of our government, that metaphor is apt, because who would be presiding over the impeachment trial of Donald J. Trump? Yeah. And as far as I know, Roberts isn't Mexican like Curiel is. Okay? But they'll find something about Roberts, because this is the way that Trump plays. He just punches back. It's his First Amendment rights. I'm just punching back. Well, I don't know. I laugh out of just complete incredulousness, indeed. And I get to go to Thanksgiving today at my nephew's, and I guess that would be my niece-in-law? Yeah, or just my niece. We're going to their house for Thanksgiving today. So I don't really have to cook very much, which is the good thing. But the bad thing is that, well, I have a Trump bro. And I do love him. But, he's a Trump bro. And we have made somewhat of a pact that we won't speak about politics. But I do know that we don't speak about politics when I enter the room. He's okay about trying to hammer people and gaslight him until I get there because, well, it's not my first rodeo now, is it? And I am the older brother. And sometimes, you got to exert a little bit of, superiority over the group. As older brothers sometimes will do. But I always thought if I was going to preside in any kind of authoritarian way, that it would be benign, loving, and extremely informed. Not just by edict, no, by reason. And so it's going to be a test, I'm sure, because there's so much going on. Everything that's happening to Trump, of course, I will just say this about my Trump bro and his argument. Everything that's going on is a hoax, is a conspiracy. We have fallen for a conspiracy, and now apparently the Supreme Court has too. Every aspect of every institution of America has fallen to this terrible conspiracy against Trump. It sounds like a cult, and I don't know, maybe we need to have an intervention with my brother. One where we hog-tie him, gag him, and then kidnap him and take him to a conversion therapy unit. That might be kind of fun. Maybe we can take some of his friends. Well, what's on the rest of the menu? Well, Neil Catal broke it down for us, didn't he? Trump's attacks on Roberts are not the actions of a president of the United States, but completely the actions of an authoritarian government. So much so, did you hear that Kelly went right over Mad Dog Mattis's head and said, "Hey, troops, if they're brown, shoot them down." And Kirstjen Nielsen said, yeah, can I watch? Can I? I think that John Kelly just pre-admitted to war crimes, let alone violation of our own domestic law. And I'm looking at you, Posse Comitatus. And I know now the right wing is whining, saying, he can't even pronounce it. Why do we have to follow it? Happy Thanksgiving, folks. Hope you have a good one. Auspicious day for those of us of a certain age. This day will be indelible in our memories. Up until the day we die, I'm sure. Yeah, John Kennedy was assassinated on this day in 1963. What's on the rest of the menu? Continuing on in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, FEMA won't enact a major housing program that would help California wildfire survivors. And I wonder who told them not to do that. I wonder. ICE agents are accused of stalling an undocumented immigrant's marriage paperwork before his hearing, and he's not the only one, just the most famous. And the Education Department shrugs off evidence of a major loan servicer's predatory behavior. Well, I don't know. If you're running an Amway pyramid scheme at the Education Department, you got to get a rube somewhere. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where thanks to the Republican tax bill, big banks are claiming record profits. Gee, no one could have imagined or prophesized that. And the right's push to privatize schools took a major beating in the midterms. We need to have some good news, don't we? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is the chat room link. Please engage with us there. It is a fair place to engage. Kelly Lincoln monitors that platform and does it admirably. Thank you, Kelly. Do then take a gander to the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. The contribute button is there, and thank you for your generosity. If you could become a recurring Patreon to Netroots Radio, even a small recurring donation goes a long way here, and I guess we're in a fund drive. Every holiday, people put on a fund drive, and I know that you got money to go elsewhere. But if you could even just afford a cup of coffee a month and buy us that virtually and become a Patreon, that would help so tremendously. Costs are going up. I just got the bills again, and everything's going up. So we are unable to do this without you. So thank you for your generosity. Follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that platform, and he does it admirably as well. Thank you, Tom. You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and you can also then pick up show notes and links from the diary that I post on Daily Kos, where I can be found as Justice Putnam. You know, I hate the idea that I'm going to be mentioning Facebook because we're over there. Kelly does take care of the Netroots Radio Facebook page for the most part. But, you know, Sheryl Sandberg coming out and saying, oh, yeah, I'm responsible for hiring that right-wing Oppo firm to work for us, to go after our critics. But I'm not going to quit. And I take full responsibility for it, and we're sorry. And but it is Thanksgiving. I know everybody wants to get out of here. So thanks. Now get out of here. Okay. This is an evil corporation, and I suppose I have many acquaintances, many colleagues who, if they have never been on Facebook, are now leaving in droves. And it may be that Netroots Radio will be not having a presence on Facebook because of Zuckerberg et al.'s absolute doing evil. All right? What is up? Okay, so why don't you go ahead and follow Netroots Radio on Twitter? We are there at Cookbook West. You can pick up podcasts of the show by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found. All right. So this first article here comes out of Think Progress. Here in being the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. And it is Thanksgiving. You know, in the Bay Area, crab is, if not the main dish, right up there next to the turkey. All right. We always had crab. So, or some sort of seafood. I always would make a big paella and bring it for those of us who were like out in the world without any family. We would gather. All right, this first article once again is out of Think Progress by Danielle McLean. The Trump administration has still not enacted a federal disaster relief program that could provide essential housing assistance to people displaced by the California wildfires, and federal officials are refusing to say whether they have any plans to do so. Well, that's nice. In parts of the state hit hardest by California's most deadly and destructive wildfires that have displaced hundreds of thousands of people, emergency shelters have become full, and available hotel rooms for people receiving FEMA disaster assistance are scarce. Not every hotel accepts FEMA payments. FEMA told Think Progress in an email that as of Tuesday morning, only 49 families, 120 individual people, have checked into hotels through FEMA's Transitional Sheltering Assistance Program, known as the TSA. Well, that's ominous. The TSA program pays for hotel sheltering for people displaced in emergencies, but not all hotels and motels will accept that payment because maybe they want to gouge people in their time of need. But there are other programs available at FEMA. The agency has thus far refused to enact a Department of Housing and Urban Development administered program that would provide essential housing relief to those people in desperate need of stable housing. The Disaster Housing Assistance Program, known as DHAP, created in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, provides housing subsidies to survivors and evacuees and covers the cost of rent, security deposit, and utilities. Advocates say help is needed now, and DHAP should be activated. Families in California will need temporary homes from which to rebuild, said Diane Yentl, CEO and president of the National Low Income Housing Coalition. The DHAP program is a far more cost-effective and more humane solution. Unfortunately, FEMA has consistently refused to put this best practice into action, resulting in predictable and preventable homelessness for some survivors. Well, they found out that by not enacting these programs in Puerto Rico, how well it worked. Because everybody knows property is more valuable when delivered vacant. Everybody knows that. There's no Russian that's going to overpay for property by $100 to $200 million over asking if it's occupied. Come on. FEMA has refused to enact DHAP for any declared disaster since Trump has taken office. It has previously been enacted following Hurricanes Katrina, Rita, Gustav, Ike, and Sandy. The federal agency has called the program inefficient and not cost-effective, and more costly and difficult for evacuees than some other programs. Previously, former FEMA Secretary Brock Long incorrectly claimed a 2011 Inspector General report showed the program was ineffective. No, they are lying. Hotel space in areas devastated by the wildfires are in desperate short supply. There are only 9 TSA-registered hotels within 50 miles of Paradise, California. No, it's called Pleasure now. Trump called it Pleasure, so everybody has to change the charter of the town and call it Pleasure, not Paradise. In the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, FEMA refused to enact the DHAP program, then later stopped funding the hotel rooms for more than 1,000 displaced Puerto Ricans reliant on the program a year after they became displaced. FEMA gave below-market rate short-term rental subsidies to people who relocated to the U.S. mainland and denied a large number of people repairs to their homes, leaving many in a state of homelessness. And I'll reiterate, property is always more valuable when delivered vacant. Alan Pike of Think Progress brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Jose Sanchez thought he was just going out for a sandwich. So did his partner, Susan, who didn't know yet that she was pregnant. But ICE agents scooped Sanchez up at the sandwich shop in Washington, D.C. that July afternoon, 14 years after he'd first arrived in the U.S. as a young teenager from El Salvador. Now, Susan said, she's going to the doctor visits alone, working extra shifts to keep the lights on, help Jose fight deportation and pay for phone calls from the Virginia detention facility where he's being held by ICE, pending a December 7th hearing before an immigration judge. Doctors have discovered an unknown issue with her heart during the months her fiancé has been locked up, she said, and her long-standing struggles with depression and anxiety have worsened without the man who lifts her spirits. I could see if he committed some kind of crime, and they took him in because of not having papers, but it wasn't like that. It just seems really unfair to be held prisoner for just not having papers. And it used to be just a misdemeanor until we made it into a national security threat with very bad people we have to shoot. Instead, ICE has used Sanchez's full-sleeve tattoos, a common thing among D.C.'s food industry workers. Oh, did I fail to mention? He's one of the top chefs in D.C. at one of the top restaurants. So they're going to use those tattoos on his arms and accuse him of being gang-affiliated and convince a judge to hold him without bond. Sanchez has no gang connections, but the tattoos as evidence thing fits a pattern of paper-thin gang affiliations from ICE. And that's according to Julie Mao, an attorney with the National Immigration Project of the National Lawyers Guild, who is trying to help Sanchez find representation before his hearing date. Susan and Jose had been talking about moving in together before his arrest and decided to marry after Susan realized she was pregnant. At the time, he was being held a 7 hours drive away in Norfolk, Virginia. Now he's closer, but still too far from the public transit hub for her to visit, unless one of the kind strangers involved with the organization Sanctuary DMV can drive her down to Farmville. And the paperwork they need to formalize their union has been returned without the necessary notarization from the Farmville facility's in-house notary public, leaving Jose and Susan without a crucial legal argument as the days tick down toward his hearing. Jose told me that they told him they won't do it, but they're not telling me that. Susan, who asked Think Progress not to use her last name for fear of reprisals from ICE, they were like, oh no, we wouldn't just refuse to notarize it. The notary must not have been there. Everybody tells you something different. If the two are married, Mao said, the duration of their relationship and the fact of Susan's pregnancy would likely clear the immigration court's hurdles for finding a marriage bona fide and thus allow Jose to seek the cancellation of his removal order. Even though ICE approved Jose's request in October to get married inside the Farmville Detention Center without the legal and bureaucratic details squared away, the court would likely ignore their relationship in deciding his fate. Whether a stalling tactic or a good faith error, Jose and Susan's inability to get a notarized original copy of the license app to the relevant officials in Prince William County is likely to result in his abrupt removal from the country he's called home for half his life, leaving Susan alone for the duration of her pregnancy. Well, I'm sure the Trump people will say she could just move to El Salvador if she loves him so much. Progress brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We'll be going just a little over into our break, but it's okay. It's the holiday, isn't it? Now, Navient, the third largest student loan servicer in the country, directed borrowers toward higher cost repayment plans and did not offer better options, according to a 2017 audit by the U.S. Department of Education. The department did not make requirements or sanctions and simply offered recommendations for the company. Now, the AP obtained a copy of the audit from Senator Elizabeth Warren's office. It was not shared with plaintiffs in federal and state lawsuits against the student loan servicing company. Washington, Mississippi, California, Pennsylvania, and Illinois are suing the company, alleging that its actions break consumer protection laws. And The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's lawsuit has said Navient's actions were deceptive. For the audit, the department listened to 2,400 calls to borrowers from 2014 to 2017. Nearly 1 out of 10 calls featured a representative who did not offer all of the options they could have offered, such as income-based repayment options. These representatives did not ask questions to find out if the borrower would have benefited from such a plan, and that's according to the audit. The CFPB's lawsuit has said Navient's actions were deceptive, and that between 2010 and 2015, the company added around $4 billion in interest to those borrowers' loans through overusing forbearance. When loans are in forbearance, they usually accumulate interest and are more costly to the borrower in the long term. And then Navient can sell that loan as a package, and third parties will then get, pennies on the dollar for getting the full amount of the loan back. Yes, they do. It's almost like a scam. Well, earlier this year, a CFPB attorney told a judge that the Education Department refused to send documents of Navient's loan management. The CFPB is dealing with its own changes and was restructured under the Trump administration. Its acting director, Mike Mulvaney, ended the Student Lending Office's operations, which included student loan services and lawsuits against for-profit colleges. And top official there, Seth Frotman, was forced to handle only financial education issues and left the agency, accusing it of failing borrowers. The department's lack of action on the issue is consistent with its handling of student debt issues since Betsy DeVos stepped into her role as secretary. In April of 2017, DeVos reversed Obama-era directives that were supposed to make it easier for borrowers to pay back their loans and hold student loan servicers accountable. She's running a Ponzi scheme. She doesn't want people to be able to pay their loans. She wants them to accumulate interest so that they get that loan into a package. Let's get to our break, and when we come back, we will go through weather from around the world on this Thanksgiving Day and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to Netroots
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Thanksgiving is, of course, really all about the side dishes. And alongside mashed potatoes and the yams, Brussels sprouts are a common side on many Thanksgiving tables. Not that they're equally appreciated, but science is here to save Turkey Day with a way to mitigate the sprouts' intense, slightly bitter flavor. And here's the secret. Take swigs of red wine as you eat them. Like any human research study, or perhaps more importantly for one in which you'll be forcing people to eat Brussels sprouts, the project started off with approval from an ethics committee. Researchers then served 28 volunteers slices of microwaved Brussels sprouts and asked them to rate the intensity of their flavor on a scale of 1 to 10. They then alternated their bites with red wine, gravy, or bottled water and rated the flavor again. Turns out the subjects scored the sprouts as significantly less intense on the flavor scale after a sip of wine, 3.5 out of 10 compared to 5.5. Maybe the scientists right because the astringency of wine interferes with the saliva's ability to deliver bitter flavor molecules to the taste buds. The results are in the Journal of Texture Studies, which is a real publication. Unfortunately for the kids at the table, gravy and water did not do the taste trick. But for adults who choose to use this Thanksgiving hack, please imbibe responsibly, though it's hard to imagine you'll be eating that many Brussels sprouts. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
1 in 6 Americans get sick from eating contaminated food each year. Contamination caused by salmonella is especially common. It's sometimes found in poultry, eggs, ground beef, pork, and even peanut butter. To reduce your risk from this and other foodborne germs, remember to clean, separate, cook, and chill. Clean your hands with soap and water. Separate raw meat, poultry, and seafood from other foods. Wash counters, cutting boards, and utensils before and after using them. Cook all food thoroughly and use a food thermometer to make sure food is cooked. Promptly chill meat, poultry, eggs, and other perishables. Finally, don't prepare food for others if you're sick, and be extra careful when you prepare food for children, pregnant women, the elderly, or people in poor health. To learn more about making food safer to eat, visit www.cdc.gov/vital signs.
And this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1952. That was the day 100,000 oil refinery workers went out on strike. The work stoppage was called by a coalition of 22 unions, including AFL and CIO affiliates and independent unions. They demanded a 25-cent hourly wage increase with shift differentials. Shutdowns began at once, and picket lines were up as soon as procedures were safely completed. The strike threatened to cut production in half. Union leaders called all but the California refinery workers out, who were central to the war effort in Korea. Oil barons had given refinery workers the runaround for 8 months during contract negotiations. The union had even postponed the original strike date in March to give federal mediation a chance in effecting a settlement. When this failed, President Harry Truman brought the case to the Wage Stabilization Board, which issued a ruling favorable to the industry. 80 companies demanded separate hearings for all 200 bargaining units involved. The union wanted one hearing for all. Even after this victory for the oil companies, they then refused to attend the hearings. When the board threw up its hands in mid-April, the new strike deadline was set. 8 days into the strike, the board ordered oil workers back to work, which they flat out refused. The oil workers union stated, quote, "Strikers are fighting against a stacked deck. If corporation executives are permitted to ignore workers' needs, then to manipulate the government so the right to strike is denied, collective bargaining will be destroyed." The board then set a 15-cent an hour wage cap and shift differentials. Workers were back on the job by the end of the month, having avoided possible Taft-Hartley actions from President Truman. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Here, you are nobody. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. And that's what Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, told Guadalupe Plasencia, who had been picked up by the San Bernardino, California County Sheriff's Office and handed over to ICE because there was a 10-year-old court order to appear as a witness issued for someone with a similar name. Ms. Plasencia kept protesting. She is, after all, and has been for decades, a U.S. citizen. She has nothing to do with immigration, nothing. And the agents in response mocked her and added for emphasis, "You are nothing." ICE eventually let Ms. Plasencia go after her daughter showed the ICE agents her mother's U.S. passport. Later, with the ACLU as her attorneys, Ms. Plasencia sued. And just recently, the federal government and the county sheriff's department settled her case for $55,000. Her ACLU of Southern California attorney, Adriana Wong, said, quote, "San Bernardino County residents like Ms. Plasencia have the right to live and work and raise their children in peace without fear that ICE will arrest them without cause. And the government should be held accountable when it violates people's rights." This case shows, fortunately, that still, at times, the government can be held to account. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
I'm Mark Boulanger. Workers in Israel have called for a national strike to support Palestinian construction workers who are fighting to win better safety conditions. 80% of construction workers in Israel are Palestinians. More than 20 have been killed on the job since the start of the year. The strike in support of Palestinian construction workers is being supported by many unions in Israel, including the powerful National Transportation Workers Union. The president of the union, Avi Edri, spoke in support of the construction workers at a recently held global congress of the International Transport Workers Federation, the ITF.
Let's talk about improving the life of Palestinian workers. Let's talk about the solidarity that I, as a strong union, can give to Palestinian workers. I have an excellent example for my words. There's 85,000 construction workers in Israel. 70,000 of them are Palestinians, meaning 83% of the construction workers in Israel are Palestinians. Unfortunately, from the beginning of the year, 37 construction workers were killed at their own workplace. 26 of them were Palestinians. Due to this, my federation, the Netroots, announced on the 7th of October this year a general dispute on the issue of safety of construction workers in Israel. Meaning, if the government will not improve the safety of construction workers, all the workers in Israel, including the transport workers, will strike a solidarity with the construction workers. My union does not represent the construction workers in Israel. And still, the workers of transport union in Israel will strike for the safety of Palestinians workers. This is our job. This is our role as unions. We are not governments. Let governments from both sides do their job that they were elected by the people to do. And let us do our job that our workers elected us to do. This is the first Congress in 11 years that I'm not dealing with motion to boycott goods for my country. It's the first Congress in 11 years that I dealt with professional issues and not with political issues. I had professional meetings with the railway unions from Germany, Switzerland, and New Zealand. It's against nature that union will act against workers, and no matter from where they are coming from. To my brothers from Palestine, only we can solve our problems. Let's work together with the support of the ITF to improve the lives of our workers. I have no doubt that if we will work together as unions, we will inspire our governments to work together as governments. Be'ezrat Hashem, inshallah, with God's helps, we will bring a real peace between us.
The International Transport Workers Federation was instrumental in negotiating a cooperation agreement between the Israeli Transport Union and the Palestinian General Union of Transport Workers. Avi Edri was one of the unionists who helped pull together the deal. And that's it. International labor news you can use. You can find more labor news on our website at www.radiolabor.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Labor. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes. This week, President Trump berated Pakistan on Twitter for harboring Osama bin Laden and, quote, doing nothing for us. Speaking to reporters on Tuesday, Trump said Pakistan would no longer receive $1.3 billion in U.S. aid, though it wasn't clear whether he was speaking of upcoming aid or merely reiterating previous cuts. A Pentagon statement that mentioned $1.6 billion in suspended aid added little clarity. Marvin Weinbaum directs the Afghanistan and Pakistan project at the Middle East Institute and says U.S. aid cuts have failed to convince Pakistan to sever ties with the Taliban in the past.
We've played that card with no success.
Weinbaum says reopening old wounds now could be self-defeating.
What is surprising is the timing of this.
Pakistan is widely believed to be harboring senior Taliban leaders and therefore holds important sway over the group the U.S. desperately needs at the negotiating table to resolve the political crisis in Afghanistan. Pakistan could apply pressure on the Taliban, but nasty U.S. rhetoric is an unusual incentive for doing so.
Specifically now, Pakistan has got to be on board if we're going to make any progress really towards serious negotiations with the Taliban.
Repairing the relationship with Pakistan won't be easy, given its interest in keeping Afghanistan a failed state. A stable Afghanistan could forge ties with Pakistan's chief rival India, which Trump has been cozying up to. But an unlikely breakthrough could come from China, which is investing billions in Pakistani infrastructure, a gamble that economic incentives could achieve what U.S. coercion has not.
If they are able with this to strengthen Pakistan's economy and make the country economically stronger, a Pakistan which is succeeding is in a much better position to move against its own domestic extremist groups.
Luke Vargas, New York.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays on this Thanksgiving Day. Let's begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 45 degrees Fahrenheit, and we are expected to go to a high of 51, an overnight low of 44 or so, mid-40s we'll say. We are currently only have a light mist, though we did get a bit of rain yesterday and overnight, about a half an inch. We are expecting a third of an inch today. Right now the winds are out of the northeast at a negligible 1 mile per hour. Let's see if we have a wind advisory still. No, they've taken that off. But winds will pick up in just another hour or so as they shift out of the south-southwest at 10 to 20 miles per hour. Will decrease ever so slightly tonight at 10 to 15 miles per hour out of the southeast. And then we'll shift to the west tomorrow with a sustained 10 to 15 miles per hour. Rain rain today, about a third of an inch. More rain tonight, about a third of an inch, and we're looking at about, it looks like a quarter of an inch tomorrow. And then Saturday and Sunday, maybe light mist. And then next week, it looks like we're packed full of rain, except they are calling that showers. We'll see how that turns out. Right now, it looks like, pollen is still not an issue because it is rated as none. The air quality index is moderate at 54 parts per million. I think that's more indicative of people burning their wood in their fireplaces and wood stoves. And the daytime UV index is in the low, which is green, a green low. Daytime UV index of 1. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.82 inches. Visibility is down to 6 miles. And relative humidity is at 97%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. London is 42 with haze. Paris is 40 degrees with a rain shower. Rome is 61 degrees and fair with a active weather advisory of potential disruption due to wind. So take care out there. Kiev is 25 degrees and fair. Kabul is 43 and mostly cloudy, which is mostly good for people who are, trying to avoid drones. Good weather when it's mostly cloudy. I know I keep hammering on that, but I don't want people to forget. We've been there for 20 years, Hong Kong is 65 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 51 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 61 degrees and clear with wind. San Francisco, California is 54 degrees and partly cloudy with an active weather warning of gale force winds out of the south-southwest. And New York, New York is 24 degrees and sunny. And you have a small craft advisory with wind gusts out of the north. So do take care if you happen to be sailing on this chilly morning in New York. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Rebecca Entralgo, also of Think Progress, brings us this first offering here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Yeah, we're drawing off Think Progress today. The U.S. banking industry is rolling in cash this quarter, largely due in part to the GOP Trump tax bill passed last December. Data from the FDIC released on Tuesday show big banks earned $62 billion in the third quarter of 2018, the highest return on assets in the 3 decades-long history of the FDIC's quarterly banking profile, up nearly 30% from the same period the year before. About half of those profits can be attributed to the tax bill, which dramatically lowered the effective tax rate for banks. Oh, did you also hear or see this morning that Trump was, or even yesterday, Trump was thanking Saudi Arabia for the low gas prices? And he continued this morning while attacking Roberts for and the whole court system for being the enemies of the state. He purports that we have very low gas prices, and yet we have the highest gas prices right now than we've had in 4 years. Back to this story. Thanks to the GOP tax bill, banks pay effective tax rates lower than the new 21% rate for corporations. Shortly after the bill's passage, J.P. Morgan Chase announced it expected to reduce their tax rate to just 19%, a cut of nearly 1/3 of what they paid the year before. Vacancy always drives value. While Trump and congressional Republicans marketed the GOP tax bill as a gigantic boon for the middle class, even promising the average family would receive a 4,000% pay raise, now, 11 months after the bill was signed into law, there hasn't been much change. Well, who could have prophesied that? Hourly wages have basically remained stagnant. Well, I don't know. I think they've remained stagnant since before the 80s. Well, maybe right during the 80s. Reagan. Wages have remained stagnant. Profits for corporations have skyrocketed. It's like a seesaw. Much of a show was made of the bonuses that corporations doled out after the bill was passed, but those wound up to be nothing but a publicity stunt. The majority of companies publicized the bonuses just as they used their tax savings to award stock buybacks to shareholders, while offsetting the cost of closing stores where thousands of people worked. Here's your bonus. Sorry, and you don't get to collect unemployment now because we gave you a bonus. They laugh and rub their hands together. It's like Snidely Whiplash. The total of those announced bonuses totaled roughly $981 million, while the cost of the tax bill was actually $1.4 trillion, meaning workers got only 0.9%. Happy Thanksgiving.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Jeff Bryant of the Independent Media Institute brings us this final offering here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The blue wave that swept the nation in the recent midterm elections was also a broad rejection of recent trends to privatize public education through school voucher programs and privately operated charter schools. From New York to California, new candidates ran and won on platforms opposed to privatization. Big money backers of charter schools suffered humiliating losses, and voters trounced efforts to expand voucher programs that drain public schools of the funding they need. This spring, this spring's teacher walkouts that made news across the country can take some credit for propelling the anti-privatization message to voters and prompting educators to take their support for public schools to the ballot box. But opposition to the privatization industry was also strong in states that did not experience teacher walkouts, and public education advocates are vowing to take their cause to state capitals and Congress to curb the flow of public money to unaccountable, privately operated education providers. We're looking at you, Davos. Let's see. California has become the source of a never-ending stream of charter scandals, observes Valerie Strauss, an education blogger for the Washington Post. Strauss points to research conducted by Carol Burris, the executive director of the Network for Public Education, that finds the state with the largest number of charters also has one of the highest incidents of charter school scandals due to the state's mostly hands-off attitude toward regulating these schools. Other studies have found that charter schools gouge California school districts for millions in precious education funds, which forces public schools to cut back on services, increase class size, fire teachers, and take other cost-cutting steps that harm students and push public schools toward financial ruin. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. I'm pretty sure we're going to be back tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Friday. We'll see. We'll have something. I expect to be here, so do stay tuned for that. And also stay tuned for all the breaking news on Netroots Radio as it breaks all day and all night. And we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Happy Thanksgiving and bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent près du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte coeur. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de retendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.